Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic. Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing you've ever heard a child say? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My little sister used to say, sometimes at night a man comes into my room and tries to eat me. She would wake up in cold sweats and sleep in my room almost every night. It got so bad we had to take her to a therapist. It turns out our stepdad used to come in her room at night and touch her. I'm not sure if this counts as creepy, but it was scary to me. She's currently in trauma therapy, and my stepfather is no longer in the picture. My 4-year-old daughter says that before she was born, she was a ghost, and when she was a ghost, she would spy on us because she couldn't wait to be alive and living with us. I'm not scared of the thing under my bed. The thing under the bed is my friend. On further questioning, the thing under his bed was our border collie, who sometimes naps there. We had just moved into an old farmhouse when one night my 3-year-old at the time pointed at the glass door and asked why the other mummy was there. I looked and couldn't see anything and asked what she looked like. My 3-year-old proceeded to explain that our other mummy was dirty and muddy and had blue lips and blonde hair. I kind of froze because we were home alone together. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And he says, yes, she lives under the ground. She said she had a good boy like me once. It made my stomach drop, and I took him to my room and locked the door. We were at a family gathering, and then my 4-year-old daughter did not want to leave. She kept repeating, but it's the last time we will all be together, as we had to literally football carry her out while wrangling our other kids. We were at our beloved aunt's home, who suddenly passed 2 weeks later. It was indeed the last time we were all together, but I wouldn't give to have listened to my daughter in that moment and stayed longer at my aunt's house. My niece was talking to her imaginary friends in the back of the car. She said it was a boy and girl about her age and they were brother and sister. Then as we came near the end of the road, she said, "This is their home. Can we drop them off here?" Myself and my sister were laughing about it, until we reached the end of the road and it was a cemetery. She gave a little wave and said goodbye as we passed. Not sure if this counts, but when I was 8, I had a new babysitter. She was a teenager, and right after my parents left, she asked me in this pleasant tone, "All right, unicorn puppy, where's the stuff your daddy drinks before he hits your mommy?" I come from a stable household with 2 parents that had a good marriage. I was confused and said, "I don't know, my dad doesn't hit my mom." And she fell kind of silent. The rest of the night till my parents got back, she was awkwardly quiet and I never saw her again. It's only recently I remember this, and the realization of what was going on in her life came to me. I feel bad that I took my stable childhood and had 2 loving parents in my life for granted. Unsure if this counts, but here we go. When I was 4, I had an imaginary friend. His name was Billy. Sometimes his friend was with him. Her name was Lady. Billy went with me everywhere. He had a spot at the table, he was on the swing next to me at the park, he slept on the top bunk, etc. I was really afraid of milk tankers and would shake and cry whenever I saw one. When I saw an ambulance, I would say, "Mom, Billy died in there." Anyway, we moved to a small town to be closer to my grandparents, and Mom started doing ancestry. She found an uncle named Billy who died in an ambulance after colliding with a milk tanker. His wife was with him. He can't remember her name, but her nickname was Lady. Also, 2 of their 3 kids were in the car. Unfortunately, no one survived. Turns out the small town we just moved to was the town it happened just out of, and they died about 15 years before I was born. When my niece was about 3, she told her mom that she liked her much better than her other mummy because her other mummy was mean, and one day she held my head under the water for too long. Same niece, aged around 6, told me that her creepily named dolls were made of blood, bones, and mud, but watch out. Don't let them touch you, because they'll turn you into a doll. Turn away from the dolls, and she says something behind me, "No, Ethel, I told you, do not touch her. She's the best." Meeting my niece for the first time, while staring me out and trying with all her 6-year-old might to break my finger in half, clenching and wrenching and screaming like a weightlifter possessed, she suddenly stopped unblinking and said, "I promise there's a good person trapped inside of me." Glad to report that she did not turn out to be a psychopath, but in the back of my head I always think, not a psychopath yet. I moved from Maine to Texas to live with my brother, who was in the Air Force. Mind you, we have no family or friends in Texas, so I didn't know a single soul. While working at Walmart in Fort Worth, I had an unknown child come up to me and say, "I know you," to which I said, "Must be a mistake, I'm not from here." The kid said he remembered seeing me eating at a unique local restaurant from my hometown in Maine last year. It was such a weird experience. I still never figured out who he was. Must have been like 11 or 12 years old. "Mummy, can we sleep with the TV on? I don't want the big people to watch us sleep again." The night before, I had a terrible nightmare that aliens were watching us sleep. It was almost like an out-of-body experience, because I could see us in bed in my bedroom exactly how I left it at night. At first, I didn't think anything of it until she said that, and then I realized maybe it wasn't a dream. She was only 2 at the time. My brother's friend was a teacher in a very rural Australian school, and her class were all Indigenous kids, Aboriginal. When the lunch bell rang, the kids would fight to go play on the oval. One day, the lunch bell went off, and all the kids just sat there. She asked, "Aren't you going out on the oval to play?" One of the kids replied, "No, miss, the tall men are there." She looked and didn't see anything and said so. One of the other kids said, "She can't see them, she's a white fella," and they wouldn't go outside. My half-brother has a very particular name. His father had an older brother who died at a very young age with the same name. My brother was named after him. When my brother was 3 or 4 years old, he looked straight into my dad's eyes and said, "Dad, do you remember when I was older than you and we played together? Then I fell asleep and now I'm younger." My kid was maybe 2 or 3, mostly nonverbal at the time. He was a very late bloomer. Anyway, was having a very animated conversation in his bedroom. I asked what was going on, and he says he was talking to his ghost friend. Okay. I'm still skeptical, but have no clue where he would have heard that from. Years later, his older sister claims there was a ghost or weird happenings at the same house. Not sure what to think, and still creeps me out. So, after years of reading stories, and some of them are about this topic, do you think kids see the world differently, or are they attuned to maybe a frequency that we can't hear or see as we age? It's certainly curious, even if you're a skeptic. It's odd, right? My niece had never met my dad, her granddad, and he had passed away the year before she was born. When she was 3 years old, she pointed at the corner that was his walking stick used to sit in, waved and said, "Hi, Granddad," with the biggest smile on her face. It was the creepiest and sweetest thing I'd ever seen. My then 3-year-old had a few gems. Him: "I was so mad at you, I was going to destroy you." Me: "Yeah, how so?" Him: "I was going to throw you in a volcano." Me: "Why didn't you?" Him: "I don't know where a volcano is." Me: "So we good?" Him: "For now." The other one: Him: "Too bad the babysitter died." Me: "No, she didn't, bud. She's just not here today." Him: "Or she's in the freezer," while staring at the freezer. Me: "You're pretty creepy sometimes, bud." Him: just smiles. When I was around 20 or 21, I would often go to my friend Stephanie's house. Her little sister Katie, about 6 years old or so, would often be playing in the other room. One day I went over and Katie was playing with one of her Barbie dolls. Stephanie and I started playing Dr. Mario, which was a household staple at her place. Her mom was super good at it. After a few minutes, Katie came over to us and asked if we were going to play for much longer because she wanted to play with her. Steph told her that we'd be playing for a while. Katie looked at me and said, "Let me know when you're done because she's just going to stare at you until you come play with us." Steph and I were like, "What? Who?" Katie walked away and said, "Just hurry up and play with me." To this day, Katie insists that she has no idea what we were talking about, but we know what we heard. Still gives me chills. A little girl walked up to us at the airport and said, "Don't get on the plane." I looked at my wife and we were both confused. I turned back to ask where her parents were, and she was already lost in the crowd. The only time I've been freaked out on a flight. My wife was totally out of it because of the Valium she gets to use for flying. Not sure if this counts, but I was like 8 or 9 and had a feeling our family dog was going to die that night. I told our family, and they thought I was just being a dumb kid. That night our dog passed away in his sleep. I had a really strong bond with that dog. I used to talk to it every day, and it was my therapist when my parents abused me or fought loudly with each other. Also, since he passed, I haven't been mentally the same and have been in a chronic state of depression, and I'm 34 now. It's still there. I have 3 children, 1 girl, the eldest, and 2 boys. When my daughter was about 4, she used to talk frequently about how when she was here before, she and her little sister, she was an only child at the time, drowned, and how she was glad to be here now, but that she missed her sister. Okay, a little creepy, but kids are weird. And she grew out of it by the time she was 6 and didn't remember talking about it by the time she was 10, so whatever. Several years later, when daughter was around 12, after my second little brother was born and was himself around 4 years old, he one day suddenly comes out with, "Mommy, remember last time when I was a girl and me and big sister were on the boat and I went under the water and I died? And big sister too?" At the time, I was a single mom with 1 kid. We had just moved into this surprisingly cheap rental house. The 3rd night there, my 4-year-old daughter tells me her sister was very mad at us. Again, she was an only child at that point. 2 nights later, she comes running into my bedroom crying because her sisters were giggling in a really scary way. I let her sleep with me, but the next morning, when I went into her room so she could change, she asked me if it's normal for there to be so much blood on the walls. I packed my stuff in the car and moved out on the 6th day there. I had no one else to turn to except my brother, who at the time, we had a very poor relationship, but I called and asked for help. He was very surprised when he found out it wasn't just a relapse, and so he offered to back a couple of days later with a friend and get the rest of our stuff. He said the landlord was upset we moved so quickly, but that he'd been having problems keeping tenants for more than a couple of months at a time. His friend told me he offered the landlord to come back in a few nights and burn the place to the ground. I babysat a kid who was probably 3 or 4, and at the park she collected a dozen or more roly-polies or pill bugs and put them in a cup. She collected some leaves to feed them, pretended to take care of them. Then when it was time to leave, I said, "Let's put them back so they can go home, and we can go home too." And she turns and goes, "Nope, we need to kill them," and immediately dumps and starts stomping all of them. Most were dead before I could try to stop her. Totally had a character for her. Never quite looked at her the same after that. While changing my daughter in front of the open closet door, she kept looking around me and laughing. I asked her what was so funny. She said, "The man," to which I replied, "What man?" She then pointed at the closet and said, "The man with the snake neck." I turned around and nothing was there. I'm afraid to look into the history of my house to see if anyone hung themselves in the closet. At least she wasn't scared. My little cousin used to talk about the old man in his closet. My aunt was afraid to research the history of her house for a while. It was built in the mid-90s and no one died there as far as she knew. Eventually my cousin stopped talking about the old man in his closet, so my aunt finally looked into the history of the house and found that nothing happened there. Still, she has no idea where he got that from.